Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this review, we are looking at the Jakks Pacific World of Nintendo 4-inch Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong, and the reason I'm reviewing these is because I didn't even know they existed, but I was at Wally World and I saw them, so I got them so I could review them for you guys. I know Nintendo product isn't the most plentiful thing out there, so when something comes up that might catch people's interest, I figure it's only my job to buy them for myself. No, to review them. It does result in me buying them for myself, but I'm sure other people will be able to find them at some point. The Samus and Link that were super hard to find for a while are now everywhere in abundance, so these probably will be too. But are they any good? And are they even new figures? We're going to talk about all of that, so let's go ahead and get them off the stand and take a closer look. Well, as is customary now, before we get into the figures, we have to talk about my package. I will just show you they are the exact same package other than the naming and obviously the bubble that, or the blister that holds the actual figures, but the packaging is the same. On the front, on the back, we have DK and Diddy, and apparently these are the only two Kong members that are gonna get figures because they just show each other. On the inside, you can't see it. It's inside on the inside of the cardboard. It does mention it's just part of the World of Nintendo 4-inch assortment. So there's nothing else going on there. Okay, so that's what the packaging looks like. Very basic, standard $10 figure packaging, and I think that's reasonable enough. I'm gonna do the whole spiel for everything, but I will let you know that Diddy is basically a reissue. There are some slight differences from the last one I reviewed, but not much. So we're just gonna give a height measurement in this fairly neutral pose. Of course, that's going to change how you have him hunched over. It's actually only about 3.5 inches tall, which makes him about, let's call it 9 centimeters. Okay, and then for DK, he has to be very hunched over, unfortunately, unless you have him standing up awkwardly. But in his neutral stance, he's actually not any taller than Diddy. He's basically the same height. If you look, he's about 3.5 inches, which is gonna be about 9 centimeters. He is not big enough. You can see there, he's very small. Like, obviously, if you stand him up, he's a little bit taller, but definitely not big enough for Donkey Kong. Not even in the Diddy's first game, Donkey Kong Country, was Donkey Kong this size. He was a lot bigger than Diddy even then. Certainly for Smash Brothers or something like that, you would want Donkey Kong to be a lot bigger. And the previous figure we reviewed of him was a whole lot bigger. I'll put that review up in the corner there, but I wanted to review these anyway, just in case you guys wanted to see what they were like. So Diddy, like I said, basically a reissue. I think the coloring is a little bit different. The brown's a little bit darker. The tan has a little bit more red in it, just a touch to make it a little bit more fleshy rather than pallid looking. So that's good. The eyes are painted well. The Nintendo logo painted well. That's all fine. His stars also painted well. Even his line work for his belly, pretty good. Here's the thing, on my other one, he was lined up centered. You can see his belly button lined up with his neck. On this one, he's rotated, and the torso does not rotate articulation-wise. So I think that just comes down to how they assemble it and glue it. I can't get it to rotate. If that's a thing that you're able to do, if you get one and yours rotates, let me know. But as far as I can manage with all my man strength, it doesn't rotate. So if you're looking for these in the store, try to find one that's lined up, just in case they don't rotate. But otherwise, yeah, his colors are all pretty uniform. He looks good. No real problems there in terms of the aesthetic, other than that off-center thing. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it, but it is something to note. Okay, and then as for accessories, Diddy comes with this awesome DK barrel, which is surprisingly well done. Not perfect. You can see the yellow is a little bit off-center, unless it's meant to be that way. But then they also painted the wood lines, which are not perfect, but they're good enough. It's a nice little accessory. That's a cool little Nintendo accessory to have. And it's decent size too, so I like it. That's a fun little $10 pack you could easily buy for yourself or your kid, and it's gonna make everybody happy. As for his articulation, well, there's not much. His head basically just rotates. His shoulders have a swivel hinge. They don't get the best range. They do rotate, but again, not exactly a whole lot going on there. No swivels for the bicep in the elbow or the bicep. 90-degree elbow, just barely. The wrists can rotate. Nothing in the torso. Hips are basically the same as the shoulders. They can rotate and they have a hinge. It's not the most useful set of joints, but it's there. That's why I said with Donkey Kong, you can't really do too much with them. Same thing for Diddy. They're mostly going to be in neutral poses. The knees are ugly, but somewhat functional. And then the ankles rotate. Not super useful. And the tail rotates. Very, very basic figures. 10 bucks. They used to be 7, I think, when they very first started this line. But nowadays they're 10. I still think it's a nice enough buy if you're into Nintendo characters. What the heck? For 10 bucks, there's worse things you could spend your money on. So Diddy's alright. I'm not going to give a proper rating. It doesn't really matter for a $10 figure. And now for Donkey Kong. A totally different story, which is odd since Diddy was a reissue and should have been even cheaper. Donkey Kong is glossy. Very glossy. In comparison, Diddy is shiny, but not as shiny. Donkey Kong's colors are not anywhere near as consistent or good. There's a lot more yellow in his brown, which I don't think is a very good look for him. His head is very pale compared to the rest of his body. It's not as dark. And then the paint job is rough, at least on mine, and these can be inconsistent from figure to figure, so you might find a good one. But all the way around his eyebrow thing and around his ears, the paint is really not good for that brown. That's unfortunate. I think they'd have been better off doing separate pieces or something that wasn't this, because this is bad. His eyes aren't super googly, but the white paint is pretty terrible. So is the brown in there. Behind the eye, that's not good. The teeth look nice enough. With the gums showing, that's good. The eye is nicely done. That's painted well. And it's actually a separate piece, so I like that. And then the rest is basically molding except for the chest, which is also not painted as well as it could be. But the arms and legs are molded, and they're glossy, so they're not the best, that's for sure. He's not particularly good to look at. I guess he will be okay from a distance, and for Nintendo products you don't have that many options, so I guess it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's not great. As for accessories, DK only gets this very sad bundle of bananas, which don't even have the black at the very top, which would have been an easy enough paint job to do just to bring them to life a little bit. Sculpt is fine, so if you wanted to paint them up yourself, you could, but pretty weak on the accessory front. As for his articulation, it looks like you would have a ton of range in there based on the shape, and you get more than you might expect. He does lean side to side. Looking up and down isn't bad. It is a double ball peg, which is hilarious to me because it works about as well as Hasbro's. And it's only a $10 Donkey Kong figure. But it works well enough. It's okay. It's not as good as it could be by any means, but it can rotate and lean, so it's definitely not the worst thing in the world. For the shoulders, you get your rotation like that, and then you get your hinge, which is oddly placed, and he does cut himself with his joints, so be careful with that. But you're pretty much just going to leave it all the way forward so that you can put his arms down, where you get less than 90 degrees of a bend. It's about 90, I guess, technically. Just doesn't go all the way straight, so technically you get to the 90, but not the 180. But you do get that, and then the wrists do rotate. They don't rotate well because they aren't connected properly. Like, it's very cheap. This figure is very poor compared to Diddy. It's not very well executed or conceived. Now, the hips are about the same as Diddy's, so that's okay. They have the hinge and the rotation. You're not going to be doing a ton, but they're there. And then his knees, basically the same thing. Pretty good range there. And then the little footsies, they rotate. So you can technically stand him up, sorta, pretty well-ish. But he's not going to be looking forward. He can't look down enough. So he's basically just going to be in gorilla pose. So that kind of sucks because he's not tall enough for that. At least if you could stand him up, you could kind of fudge it. But no fudging will happen on this guy, even though he looks kind of like fudge. So his articulation isn't very good either, and his aesthetic isn't very good, and his accessories aren't very good. So unfortunately, the character whose name is on the package, well, I guess Donkey Kong's name isn't on Diddy's package, but it would be if they were based on the game Donkey Kong Country. Anyway, he's not the good one of the two. He's pretty weak. For 10 bucks, I'm not super disappointed. I'm still happy enough to have it. Basically, any classic Nintendo IP I want. I think his feet are actually on ball pegs. There's just barely any room to move it. But yeah, I'll buy it for 10 bucks, and I'm guessing you guys probably will too. But now you know, going in, look for better paint job around the eyes and ears, particularly for Donkey Kong. And for Diddy, look out for the lined up shirt. But otherwise, yeah, for 10 bucks, what the heck. Donkey Kong's not very good, but I don't hate it. That's a good thing about the price point, I guess. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. It's not a whole lot to review otherwise, so not a whole lot else for me to say. So there it is, guys. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please do give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. And if you haven't subscribed, you probably should. I have new videos almost every single day, and thousands already on the channel. So make sure you come back for all of that. And in the meantime, keep collecting.